Howdy doody. Seems like every time we meet, I use that introduction. Gets a little old, doesn't it? We're moving into an area now that basically doesn't introduce you to any new therapies, therapeutic approaches. Talks about how you supervise those. So this will be pretty brief because this is kind of a model for how you run a practice. Um, and it would be a long time before any of you who are going into counseling would get to the point of being a supervisor, but the day may come. So some of this is going to be a little, uh, hmm, it's a good term to use, not really out there, but a little bit hard to identify with. So bear with me, and we'll run over this pretty briefly. There's a what's called a paradigm shift. I know you know what that is. It's taking place in the industry, so to speak, if you want to call it that. And it has to do with how supervision is done. This thing started in 1961. You'll see that in your textbook. David Mace um, was the director of an association or a body, and today it's called the American Association for Marriage and Family Therapy, AAMFT. And being in charge, he wanted to. Uh, he was a. I don't know if he was a micromanager or what his approach to management was, but he wanted greater supervision, greater regulation of how supervision works in MFT. So he his proposal was to form a team. And that's not uncommon in big business. You form a team of folk who then brainstorm and they come up with ways to accomplish what they set out to do. That sounds pretty superficial, but it's very descriptive. And part of that movement was to have clinical, to oversee the clinical training of new kids on the block, new interns in marital counseling. And then they went forward with it. In 62, they even established a code of ethics. 10 years later, they established a set of formalized training standards for supervisors, not for counselors. So that's how this thing was given birth. And then throughout the decade of the 70s, um, they um, really drew in people from all aspects of um, of other types of counseling, and what they wanted to do was incorporate that stuff into family counseling. So they looked into things that they deemed were perceptual, conceptual, and people with intervention skills that would be able to uh, monitor supervision more than anything else. The simplest way to put it. So they came up with these kind of guidelines, I suppose you could call them. What kind of a clinical skill set would you have, and what was going to be essential in terms of training the therapists? And they came up with these three items: perceptual skills, and that was to be demonstrated by the trainee, their ability to identify those kind of skills in counselors. Conceptual skills, ability to express the meaning of clinical observations. It's easy to observe. Sometimes the interpretation is the hard part. And then intervention skills. Um, Modifying a family's interaction to achieve success. So this went through the 70s, and then in 80, this fellow Alan Hess uh, wrote a journal. I think it was a journal, and it was called Psychotherapy Supervision: Theory, Research, and Practice, and it dealt with ethical, cultural, and relational factors that occur in a supervision setting. And that moved this supervision business away from skill-based type supervision into a more philosophical, if you could call it that, and a more holistic view of what a supervisor should be capable of doing. And then that opened the floodgates, and you had journals being written everywhere. And these things covered the gamut. Supervision practices and critical appraisal of those things. And the establishment of professional reviews and critical analyses and recommendations of the best practices to incorporate supervision of those that were in your care, so to speak. It even got to a point of like they called it a gatekeeping practice, something that that would give you a way to manage what it is you were managing, in our case, counseling. There was also a movement to develop skills in practice. And within the realm of that, another book was written, Little Bronlin, excuse me, German, in a Little Bronlin and Schwartz. I'll get it right in a minute. Penn published a handbook of therapy training. So they have a manual, and they wanted this. The manual dictated that you do live supervision. One-way mirrors became popular. Systematic supervision, observing the treatment team through a one-way mirror, and then incorporating those components so that you could have observation during the counseling session. Kind of a sneaking in, looking deal with those who were doing the counseling in perfect agreement with that. So much came out of this. There was a lot of support for it, even though you knew you were going to be scrutinized. And now there's even a newer movement. They're beginning to look at social constructionism. I won't go into a deep definition of that. It's supposed to be a modernistic view of thoughts that have to do with supervision, and a more modern view is being introduced. And so we're looking more into a solution-focused, strength-based, collaborative practice of supervision, and a commonality across the board. So as you go into the field, if that's where you're headed, you're going to butt heads with this. Maybe that's the wrong way to put it. You're going to collide with this. It's going to be new for you. It's going to be new for everybody, and you're not going to have the benefit of the old way of doing things. So it's not going to be that strenuous for you to adopt into this. That's really all I want to cover about this. That's kind of out there a little bit. It has nothing to do with the practice of therapy as far as the nuts and bolts of the therapies we've covered, but it tells you a bit about the supervision and what you have to face if you're going into this profession. All right, take it easy. Be with you again this week.